Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock here in the morning in Calgary, Alberta. This is Saturday, July the 31st. I'm happy to be here. This is Worldwide Epidemic of Child Abuse and Human Rights Abuses, half-an-hour program, and we're live on internet, blogtalkradio.com internet radio. I have my chat room open if anybody would like to sit in there. And I'm just drinking coffee, waking up, and checking out the headlines and taking a look at what's going on around the world regarding human rights abuses, child abuse issues, the whole issue. Really, it's a worldwide epidemic, and I like to focus mainly on national, the national issue of child abuse and whatnot within North America. But I'm very much interested in worldwide human rights and the whole issue of human suffering worldwide. Right? I just think it's just pathetic that it's 2010 and we still see so many people suffering and so many people still behind the times, so many countries who are not willing to step up to the plate and help their own people, and so many other countries like the United States and Canada and Western Europe who are just pumping so much money into these countries to try to help them out, and their own governments won't even help them out, and I'm all for it. I think that we need to do it, but I think that we also need to concentrate nationally as well to help our own people. And so, I think the whole world needs help, obviously. So that's why I'm doing these shows, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to have people tuning in and listening to the shows. It's just awesome. The chat room is there if you'd like to sit in there, and if you're awake and like to hang out. I don't do a whole lot of interacting in the chat room, and it's just because I'm usually reading from some material, and I can't see the chat room because my screen is up where I'm reading from, because I don't print all my material. I just don't have the money to put into the ink that goes into that. So I used to do that, and it was costing me quite a bit of money just to print all the material. So I sort of stopped doing that, and it was $20, $30, $40 for a thing of ink, and I was going through them about every 2 weeks, so it was just getting too expensive. So yeah, I don't get to see the chat room too much, but once in a while I do pop in there and just say hi. And so if you're in there, I'll be sure and try to get in there and say hello. And so we're going to get right into the show. I'm not a professional counselor. I don't hold any certificates involving counseling or therapy or anything like that. I always say that on every show because I think people need to know that. I do talk a lot about child abuse. I talk a lot about survivor issues. I talk a lot about that type of thing from firsthand experience. And so, but I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own shows because I really think that we need to talk about this stuff, and that people need to get help from the people who are licensed, who have the education and the training to help us, right? And as far as the human rights goes, I study human rights, I study child rights, and I'm in between courses, so I just can't afford to go right now. The courses they're not all that expensive, but I just can't afford them right now. And my job is sort of up in the air, and I don't know, how long I'll actually be working. So I can't continue to go to school right now. So until my finances straighten out, so I'm going to continue with my courses, and that is in international community development as well as child rights, youth justice, and the whole 9 yards. I hope to come out with a degree, and in the end, and that's my goal. And so I have to work at it slowly and kind of at the only pace I can go at, which is slow. Financially, I just can't afford to do it. But eventually, I hope to walk away with a degree and to be able to really get involved and do some serious work for worldwide human rights and child rights, right? So I'm studying all the time and looking for information, and I have lots and lots of information. This morning I found some articles that were quite interesting. I actually went through quite a few, probably about 50, 60 articles just to find some that I thought were worth talking about as far as child rights goes, especially. And there are lots and lots out there. I mean, it's just crazy what's going on around the world regarding human rights, really, men, women, and children. But I like to focus on child rights because children really have no rights unless we stand up and protect their rights. And so, it's not like a child can come forward and say, hello, I have rights. Quite often they don't know they even have rights, and no one's going to tell them that, right? Not very many people tell children that they do have rights. And so we have to back up those rights. We have to stand up for them and stand up for all abuses, against all abuse, right? We need to stand up against all abuse towards anyone, men, women, children, I don't care. We have to really do this if we want to see this world a better place, right? And we need to be that change. We need to be part of that change. It's no good just to sit on the couch. That's what I was doing, sitting on the sidelines 4 years ago. Prior to that, I had always been on the sidelines. I always wanted to help, and I always quite often would donate to things and check out the headlines and look what was going on around the world, but I never got involved because I thought, that it was great. All these people were doing all this wonderful work to help people around the world, the different organizations out there. And I thought, how awesome for them, look what they're doing. And then it occurred to me one day when I saw something on TV, I thought, why am I just sitting on the sidelines? Why am I not speaking out against abuses against women, abuses against children, especially growing up in the home that I grew up in with a lot of domestic violence and abuse and a lot of child abuse and spousal abuse, right? I thought, man, I know firsthand what this is all about, and yet I'm going to sit here on the sidelines and let somebody else, take the ball and run with it, and I'm just going to sit here and do absolutely nothing, and that's what I decided to get involved in, and that's been about 3 years now. So I'm glad to be a part of it, and I hope to be able to do a whole lot more. This is just the very beginning, and this is about all I can do right now. But I will be hopefully interacting worldwide with people eventually, and making being part of that change with everybody else who's out there trying to be a part of this change to make this world a better place, right? So I found some great articles, and they were actually very sad, but interesting to take a look at, and well written. And this guy, actually I don't know if it's a guy or if it's a man or a woman, but it's Yifat Suskind from Madre, M-A-D-R-E. This website, Madre, is a great website, and I'm actually, I haven't pulled up the actual website. This is just coming into my inbox, and from the Madre newsroom, right? It's a article that was written by Yifat Suskind, S-U-S-S-K-I-N-D. This person is at Madre, and I got an email, and they said, demanding a second chance for Colombia's children of war. And I thought this article was really something, because when I saw it, it was very, very upsetting, and I thought, man, this is still going on. Children are still being dragged into the whole situation of child soldiers. This one is about a girl. And I'm going to read this article, and it's not my article. It's from Yifat, Y-I-F-A-T, Suskind, S-U-S-S-K-I-N-D, from Madre, and this person wrote this article. It says, the shy 14-year-old was not sure how many people she had killed. Quote unquote, when it was my turn to shoot someone, I always hid my face because I was afraid. Julia, not her real name, is one of thousands of children in Colombia who have been recruited for combat in a decades-long war. Her story is tragically typical. Years ago, Julia's family fled their home in the countryside when her father was accused of betraying the local guerrilla commander. And like so many displaced people, Julia's family ended up in one of Bogota's sprawling and dangerous shanty towns. Unable to enroll in school because of the cost, Julia spent most of her time in the streets. And gradually she stopped going home at night because of an abusive new stepfather. Julia was 11 years old at the time, homeless, hungry, and afraid. So here's this girl, 11 years old, on the streets in Bogota, afraid to go home because of her abusive new stepfather, right? So she's on the street, she's homeless, she's hungry, and scared, right? The men who approached her were kind. They offered food, adventure, and they said a real family if she would join their cause. They were from one of Colombia's right-wing paramilitary groups, allied with the government in an effort to eliminate leftist guerrillas and protect powerful business interests. Colombia's shadowy network of paramilitaries is notorious for their brutality, but there are no good guys in this three-way war. The guerrillas also recruit children to fight, and the government uses them as spies. According to Julia, the child soldiers are called little bees because they are quick to sting the enemy. These children are virtual slaves. Many are sexually abused for years. And to ensure that conscripted children can never return home, armed groups sometimes force them to kill their former neighbors and even family members. And I've heard about that from other websites and other information regarding child soldiers. Quite often they're made to kill their family members and neighbors and people in their own communities, and that way they can never go home, right? And that is just so sad. But we see this. This happens a lot in Africa, different countries in Africa, and around the world, really. Probably in Eastern Europe and different places like that, where they actually still recruit child soldiers and make them do horrific things. Quite often they're sexually abused, and they're just abused, and they're not looked after, and they're being forced to kill people. And this is incredibly wrong, and that's not what children are for. Children, no child is born into the world to be forced to do anything like that. That is absolutely ridiculous. And for anybody to think that's okay, really, they need to become educated and aware of the situation. That is not right. That's not what life should be about for those children. And yet, because they're starving, half of them, some of them are on the streets, some of them get kidnapped out of good homes, and I've heard about that, especially in Africa. Some children get kidnapped out of perfectly decent homes and are forced to do this type of stuff. But lots of them are on the street, running from abusive homes, running from the fact that there's just no food. Quite often these kids just have to leave the house because the parents say, well, you have to go because there's only enough food for, this is sad, but it's true, right? There'd be only enough food for the parents and for maybe 2 of the younger siblings, so the older siblings have to go. They're forced to go out on their own and fend for themselves at like 10 years old, 11 years old. I mean, this is absolutely horrific what's happening. They end up on the streets, they end up in these gangs, or they end up in these situations where they're forced to be child soldiers. And it's just not cool. Like, this is 2010. We need to wake up. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous and shouldn't be happening. I could see this going on like in 800 BC or something, but not 2010. We have the technology and the billions of dollars pumped out there to go to space, and all these countries do. Russia, China, well, not Africa, but let's just say some of the big major players do. They're pumping out millions and millions of dollars for all this new technology, and yet we have situations like this going on where people are being kidnapped and forced to kill other people. This is just barbaric, and I just think that it's so out of place with modern day society. It doesn't belong here anymore. You know what I mean? And what are we going to do to stop it? We're going to have to change. It's all about education, see? Because if these people in these other countries were to come up and raise the bar, raise the level of education in their countries, they would be able to see that what they're doing, the old generations would first of all have to die off. So all the older people would have to die. And then all the sort of middle-aged people would either have to seriously become educated or die off as well. And what we need to do is reach the children, right? Because the children are the future. And if we can change these children's minds, if we can change the situation where they're brought up in these situations where they think, oh, this is just part of life. I'm just going to be absconded, and kidnapped and taken off by some rebels, and I'll be given a gun, and I'll get some food. Hey, right on. This sounds great. Because they don't know any better. Honestly, when you put yourself in those children's shoes, they have no other way of life. That is the way that they live, and that's their life. And they don't know any other different. They don't know that there's anything different. And they know there's a big world out there full of people doing all kinds of other things, but this is their life, and they're forced to live it. And so we need to get to these children. We need to educate them and help their countries as far as education goes, and get them situated so that they can change their government. They will become the future government, right? And you don't want a bunch of child soldiers becoming the future government. It just continues the cycle of violence. It continues the cycle of war, poverty, and lack of education, right? So we got to get to these kids, and that's all there is to it. But anyway, they talk here, and they said, this is from UPHELD Siskin from Madre, says, this is what researchers from Madre, an international women's human rights organization, found when they recently conducted over 30 interviews with former child soldiers in Colombia. On July 15th, they presented the findings of these interviews, including Julia's story, in a testimony before the UN Human Rights Committee in Geneva. And they said on that day, the Colombian government defended its record before the committee. Madre was there to set the record straight. The government is deeply entwined with the illegal militias that exploit children as combatants. Since 2006, more than 60 Colombian congressmen have been investigated for links to paramilitary groups. About half have been indicted. So about 30 of those congressmen have been indicted because of their links to these paramilitary groups, right? When our researcher told Julia that Madre would deliver her testimony to the Human Rights Committee, Julia said, I want to tell them myself. We would have liked nothing more than to have Julia testify in person, but it was simply too dangerous. So she would have probably been killed, right? At a committee session less than 2 years ago, Ada Quilque, a Colombian human rights activist who Madre works with, testified about violence against indigenous peoples, another segment of the population that suffers disproportionately from the conflict. When she returned home, her husband was gunned down in an attempt to assassinate her, and she has endured regular death threats and been forced into hiding since testifying. So, this is what happens to these people when they try to testify, right? And tell the truth. Their family members are gunned down, they're gunned down, and it's to silence the truth, right? That's what people are always trying to do, silence the truth. Nobody wants the truth to get out, and so they just kill these people. And this is why we have to stand up and we have to stop this, right? This year, the Madre Supported Community Center in Bogota, where Julia and other former child soldiers received trauma counseling, art therapy, and recreational programs to help them heal from their ordeals, has faced threats and an attempted break-in. And this is the kind of stuff going on in Afghanistan as well. So this is going on in Colombia South America as well as Afghanistan. You know what I mean? This is going on in Yemen. This is going on in all of these countries where there's nothing but human rights abuses. Their lives are in danger all the time. And these people don't deserve that. I'm sorry, but they don't. No one does. And yet, why is this still happening? It's ignorance. It's a lack of education. And it's people thinking that they should be allowed to continue doing what they do, which is all criminal activity. And the governments, if they don't want to back up the laws and back up the fact that this all needs to stop, then what are you going to do? You got a country full of with one big huge mess, which they do. It's unfortunate because none of those people deserve to have to live in fear like that. I don't care who you are. I know myself. I would not want to be Julia. You know what I mean? I try, and that's not her real name, but I mean, I sit here. She's 14 years old. I try to put myself in her shoes. I would not want to be her. I mean, here's this girl who had to be on the streets because of her abusive stepfather. Then she gets involved with a group that is backed by the government to go out and kill people and forced to kill people. And I can't imagine being in her shoes and the fact that there's no future in her country. And yet she was born there. And just because she was born there dictates how her life will be. And I just think that is so sad because if their countries could become educated and raise the bar on the level of human rights and the level of education in their country, they could have a good life doing what they do, doing what Colombians do, doing what other people do. But for so many years now, they have not come up with the rest of the world as far as making this world a better place. So their world is not a better place. And it's really sad. North America has fought and fought and fought. And, Canadian soldiers, U.S. soldiers, have fought and fought and fought to keep these freedoms that we have and to not allow this kind of stuff to happen within our own countries. And we know abuses happen within our own countries. We talk about it constantly I do anyway, and I know lots of other people do. But at least there's some sort of, the laws are pretty much backed up here, even though there's problems, we still have recourse and there's still some protection, right? But down there in those countries, there's just no protection, right? And so they said here after the attempted break-in, we don't know who the perpetrators are, they said, but in a country where hundreds of human rights activists are killed each year, the director of the center is not taking any chances with the safety of these kids. We have to make do with pseudonyms and written testimonies to support our demand that the Colombian government meets its legal obligation to stop the use of child soldiers on its territory, they wrote here. But ultimately, it may be the government of the United States that has the most leverage in ending this atrocity. That's because the U.S. is footing the bill for Colombia's long war. Over the past 15 years, as Colombia has become the staunchest of U.S. allies in the hemisphere, the U.S. has poured billions in military aid, weapons, and training into the country, thereby fueling a conflict in which all sides exploit children as soldiers. So see, in doing something that they think hey, I have nothing against the United States. I'm an American, I'm a Canadian, I'm a dual citizen, and I love the United States, and I love Canada. I love everything that they stand for, and I love what they've done. They do make mistakes, and they admit it. Guaranteed they make mistakes. And who doesn't? You know what I mean? Sad part is people's lives are at stake. And they really need to change the way they're thinking about this thing, right? And I mean, there's got to be people. I know there's people being paid big bucks down there, think tanks and whatnot to try to help solve these types of situations. And why something isn't being done to change the situation, I don't know. They really need to start rethinking what they're doing. They're getting paid lots and lots of money to do it. I think they got to quit worrying about the golf course and the summer home and the retreat in the Alps or whatever. And they got to start sitting down and thinking, how are we going to change this? How are we going to change this? This is serious. People's lives are at risk here. And children's lives are at risk, and that's what counts to me. I mean, I care about all the people, but children matter to me because they have no choice but to put up with what's going on around them. They're forced to endure whatever it is that's happening. And I just think that this is ridiculous. They should not be exploited. Children are not to be exploited. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to say that for the rest of my life. And whether anybody agrees, it just doesn't matter to me. I'm just going to keep on saying it because it's true. Some of these soldiers are as young as 8 years old. Their childhood and humanity destroyed in a war that is largely financed by U.S. taxpayers. So while we'll continue to hold the Colombian government accountable to its human rights obligations, we must also work to ensure that U.S. policies are not complicit in turning children into killers. And that's what this Madre has said. And Madre is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. They are in New York, out of New York, and their website, www.madre.org, and that's madre.org. and that's a great website. They have lots and lots of good information on there, and I have, like I said, emails popping into my inbox all the time from them, and really good information. I just love what they're doing, and I love to see stuff from them because they're very proactive. I mean, they are working hard, you know what I mean, to try to make a difference, right? So, yeah, check out their website, www.madre.org. And another article that I found that I just think is so good, and it's so incredibly sad, but it's something that needs to be brought to attention here. I'm just going to bring it up. It's from UNICEF. I found 2 articles from UNICEF today, so I was checking out their website. And, excuse me, I'm just going to bring them up here. One is in Africa, and I think the other one might be too. They both might be from Africa, Nigeria, and then the other one is from Uganda, I think. But let's see. I want to pull up the I'll pull up the Nigerian one first. And yeah, this is so important. UNICEF, I love UNICEF, and I love what they do, and I'm so thankful that all these people are out here doing what they're doing. I back up UNICEF 100%. They are working so hard to help children. It's just crazy the amount of work that goes into that. This is such a distressing story here, but it's so important that we take a look at this. This is happening in Nigeria, and this is from www.unicef.org and /info by country /Nigeria _55301.html. It says cases of children accused of witchcraft rising in parts of West and Central Africa. Now, this was from July 28, 2010, very current, just a couple of days ago. Akwa Ibom State, AKWAIBOM State, Nigeria. One child is given a slice of mango and is asked to commit murder in return. Another admits to killing 800 people while flying with other witches on a piece of tree bark. These confessions are dangerous and highly revealing. The number of children accused of being witches in parts of Africa is rising, and so is the number of children suffering extreme physical or psychological violence as a result. While such stories often attract media attention, this difficult and complex topic is little understood. Vulnerable children are accused. This is what they've written here. Children accused of witchcraft, a new report from UNICEF's Regional Office for West and Central Africa, uses anthropological studies and reports from 8 agencies to shed light on accusations against children. According to the report, accusations seem to rise from multi-crisis situations and usually affect children who are already vulnerable. And many social and economic pressures, including conflict, poverty, urbanization, and the weakening of communities, or HIV/AIDS, seem to have contributed to the recent increase in witchcraft accusations against children. And UNICEF Regional Child Protection Advisor Joachim Thies, that's JOACHIMTHEIS. Child witchcraft accusations are part of a rising tide of child abuse, violence, and neglect, and they are manifestations of deeper social problems affecting society. That's what he said, or she said. Risk factors highlighted. Belief in witchcraft is widespread in Africa as in other parts of the world. However, until recently, violent allegations of witchcraft were not typically leveled against children. In several Central African countries in particular, there are now alarming numbers of killings of adults accused of being sorcerers, and a growing recent phenomenon of witchcraft accusations against children and adolescents. And children accused of witchcraft highlights the factors most likely to contribute to such accusations. Becoming an orphan and being raised by relatives is a risk factor. For example, as is the arrival of a step parent. Character traits that suggest aggression or a solitary temperament. Physical deformities or conditions such as autism can also be dangerous in this respect, and it seems that most of those accused are boys. So, character traits, right? They think that because a child acts or has a certain condition like autism that they're witches, right? This is how uneducated and how completely backward these people are. And you can imagine their day-to-day life sitting around in a country with no education, no access to any education or media or anybody with a sound frame of mind to talk to. They grow up like that, and so they can't help it. They're just highly uneducated. And it's not, their fault. It's their country's fault. It's their government's fault for not doing something about it. And it can't be their fault. Trying to get the internet into Africa, I don't know if anybody's ever seen anything or heard anything about that. Trying to just get internet access into Africa is not easy. There's no, how do you do it? There's no lines running in there. There's no there's no, what do you want to call those, antennas and towers set up, you know what I mean? So trying to get any kind of education to these people is really hard. They don't read, so what I like to promote groups who are doing great work out in Africa and as well as around the world, and the Canadian International Learning Foundation is one of them, the CILF, and that is the Canadian International Learning Foundation out of Ottawa, Canada. And I volunteer with them, and lately I have not been really doing much, and I was doing quite a bit for them, just trying to spread the word, even as far back as last winter. But I have become so involved with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children that I have put that sort of on the side. It's just sort of gone off, and not because I don't care, because I love what they're doing, and I absolutely love what they've done. They have really worked hard to get into Uganda to try to help these people and try to get education for Ugandans in a certain area in Reiki district in Kazo. And if you go to their website, www.cilf.org, you can check out what they're doing. They work really hard with groups in Uganda as well as Afghanistan, and they have a large program they work with in Afghanistan and Kandahar, and I'm part of that. I have a pen pal there, and I'm very much, that's in my heart, because those people want education. Those women and men want education, and some of them, actually a lot of them, don't agree with what's happening in their country. They never wanted to see their rights taken away. They used to be able to go to school, the women and children. They used to be able to get health care, access to health care. And then when the Russians, when the Afghani military, with the help of the United States, pushed the Russians out way back, I guess somewhere whether it was in the 80s or whatnot, it left the country in shambles. And of course, the militiamen who had the guns and the ammo that pushed the Russians out, they took over the country with their extremely, extreme religious attitudes, right? So all of a sudden, women couldn't go out in public. They had to cover themselves. They had to stay in home. They weren't allowed to go anywhere unescorted, and that's what we see today. And children were not treated harshly, but now they are. And there was, they killed the teachers. They burned the schools. They burned the books. They used to be quite educated people. And if you look back at the history of Afghanistan and you look back at the history of that whole area, they were actually one of the greatest empires and the greatest civilizations ever. They were highly educated people, and a lot of awesome stuff came out from those countries from way, way, way back. So the history, it's not what we see today, right? They were not running around with these sad human rights abuses, right? It used to be a pretty decent place to live, and everybody was pretty happy until this happened. And so now we have, and of course the life expectancy there is not very good, right? So they don't live very long, and so these adults that live, if they live to be 40 or 50, they're old. And so generation after generation with no education, it just brings the country down that much further, right? Before you know it, you have no education, no one's educated, no one knows anything, and they're walking around starving, right, and being blown up and bombed, and it's incredibly sad what's happened there. So the Canadian International Learning Foundation, along with another group, have a school in Kandahar. It's the ACCC, the Afghan Canadian Cultural Center, and it's a school. And these people learn, and of course they have to hide to go to school. They can't just go to school. They have to every day put their lives, take risk to their lives to go to school, and so do the teachers. But I just love to support those guys, and I love what they do. Be sure and check out their website. So we'll have to continue this on, but check this article here out at UNICEF about this witchcraft, children accused of witchcraft. It's really sad. And we'll have to pick this up maybe next weekend, and we'll take another look at the rest of these articles that I found, maybe some more. And have a great day, everybody. We have about a minute left. Check out Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website at www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com and get the information on the signs and symptoms of child abuse. Learn how to spot it. Learn how to report it. Be ready just in case a child comes to you and says, hey, I'm being abused. What would you do? And also take a look around at the children in your own lives and make sure that they are not being abused. That's the way to stop child abuse. And protect your children. Do all you can to protect them and keep them safe, and don't cause them a lot of fear. Get the education. Education is the key. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and have a great weekend, and we'll be talking to you real soon. If you need anything, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook. I'll be around for most of the day and part of tomorrow. So take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.